was worth more than any human being who has ever walked the earth. Not in adjusted dollars, not in historical context, literally, by any measure ancient or modern. Solomon was the wealthiest man in recorded history. Gold arrived in Jerusalem by the ton. Kings and queens traveled from the ends of the known world just to sit in his presence and ask him questions. His annual income in gold alone was 666 talents, roughly 25 tons of pure gold every single year. And this man who had seen what money does to kingdoms, to families, to the human soul at every level of abundance and poverty, sat down and wrote you a warning. Actually, he wrote you dozens of them. They are sitting in the book of Proverbs. They have been sitting there for 3,000 years, and most Christians have read them as poetry, as inspiration, as verses to put on coffee mugs, without ever once treating them as the precise, urgent, practical financial instructions they actually are. Solomon didn't write Proverbs to be decorative. He wrote it because he watched what money did to people. He watched it corrupt advisors and destroy heirs and blind otherwise faithful men to everything that mattered. He watched it from the top of the financial world with a view that no one else has ever had. He left you a map. This is that map. 8 warnings, 8 patterns, 8 places where Proverbs speaks directly into your financial life with a clarity that most modern financial advice never reaches. By the end of this video, you will not read Proverbs the same way again. 1. What Solomon was and why his financial warnings matter. Before we open the warnings, you need to understand who is speaking. Solomon did not inherit wisdom abstractly. He asked God for it specifically, not for wealth, not for victory over enemies, not for long life. He asked for a discerning heart, the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, to govern wisely, to understand what he was actually dealing with in any situation. And God gave it to him. But God also gave him what he didn't ask for. Wealth and honor beyond anything the ancient world had seen. Because the same God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills apparently decided that the wisest man alive should also see what extraordinary abundance looks like from the inside. So, Solomon wrote from a position that is utterly unique in human history. He was not a philosopher theorizing about money from a distance. He was not a poor man warning about wealth he had never experienced. He was a man who had lived inside radical abundance, who had watched it bless and corrupt and reveal and destroy, and who had the wisdom to understand what he was seeing. When Solomon warns you about money in Proverbs, he is not guessing, he is reporting. And the 8 warnings he left behind are not random. They form a coherent picture of the financial traps that catch even the most faithful, most intelligent, most well-intentioned people, including, ultimately, Solomon himself, because that is the final tragedy of his story. He knew the warnings, he wrote the warnings, and still, in the end, his own heart drifted. Which means these are not warnings for weak people. They are warnings for everyone. Including you, including the person who feels right now that their faith is strong enough that these particular dangers don't apply to them. They apply. They always apply. 2 warning 1, the danger of wanting to get rich quickly. Proverbs 28:20. A faithful person will be richly blessed, but one eager to get rich will not go unpunished. Proverbs 13:11. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Solomon watched get rich quick, thinking destroy people across every level of society. And he named it not as a financial mistake, but as a faithfulness problem. The person eager to get rich is not necessarily greedy in the obvious sense. They may be desperate. They may be tired of struggling. They may be watching others accelerate financially while they seem stuck. That desperation is real and it is human. But Solomon says it produces a particular kind of blindness, the willingness to shortcut, to take risks that wisdom would reject, to believe promises that integrity would question. You see this today in the cryptocurrencies, scheme a trusted friend recommended, in the multi-level marketing business that promised financial freedom and delivered financial embarrassment, in the investment that sounded too good to be true and was. In the side hustle that required upfront money and disappeared. 9. In the loan taken out at predatory interest rates because the need felt urgent and the terms got skimmed. Wealth built little by little is not a consolation prize for people who lack ambition. It is the only kind of wealth that is stable enough to be trusted, because it was built by the kind of character that can sustain it. If a financial opportunity requires you to move fast, decide now, skip your normal process of prayer and counsel. That urgency is not a sign of opportunity. It is the warning light Solomon described 3,000 years ago. 3. Warning 2. The trap of cosigning and financial entanglement. Proverbs 11:15. Whoever puts up security for a stranger will surely suffer, but whoever refuses to shake hands and pledge is safe. Proverbs 22:26-27. Do not be one who shakes hands and pledge, or puts up security for debts. If you lack the means to pay, your very bed will be snatched from under you. This warning is one of the most practically specific in all of Proverbs, and one of the most consistently ignored by Christians who confuse financial entanglement with generosity. Cosigning alone does not mean you believe in someone. It means you are willing to pay their debt when they cannot. And Solomon says with remarkable directness, do not do it, not with strangers. The implication in multiple passages extends to anyone whose financial habits you cannot fully trust. This is not a warning against generosity. If you want to help someone financially, give them what you can actually afford to give. That is generosity. Cosigning is not generosity. It is a transfer of risk wrapped in the feeling of generosity. And when the relationship is close enough that saying no feels cruel, that emotional pressure is precisely the mechanism Solomon is warning you about. Wisdom. The same principle extends to financial entanglement with family members. Lending money without a clear agreement. Going into business together without a written arrangement. Allowing financial dependency to develop in a relationship that was never designed to carry that weight. Solomon is not telling you to be cold or transactional with people you love. He is telling you that financial entanglement, when it goes wrong, does not just cost you money. It costs you the relationship, and the relationship was worth more than whatever amount you were trying to protect. 4. Warning 3. The spiritual cost of dishonest money. Proverbs 10:2. Ill-gotten treasures have no lasting value, but righteousness delivers from death. Proverbs 16:8. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. Proverbs 21:6. A fortune made by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a deadly snare. Solomon returns to this theme repeatedly. The money made through dishonesty, manipulation, exploitation, or deception, and his verdict is always the same. It does not last. And the pursuit of it is a snare that catches the one who set it. In the modern world, this warning lives in territory that is legally gray but morally clear. The contractor who charges for work not done. The employee who pads expense reports. The business owner who misrepresents a product to close a sale. The freelancer who invoices hours not worked. The person who files taxes in a way that is technically defensible but personally known to be dishonest. None of these people think of themselves as thieves. They think of themselves as practical people, navigating a system that is imperfect anyway. They have rationales. They have comparisons. They have a mental accounting system that keeps their self-image intact while the money flows in. But Solomon says the money itself carries a spiritual cost, a fleeting vapor, a deadly snare. The gain is real in the short term and corrosive in the long term. Not just financially, not just relationally, but in the soul of the person who built their security on something they know was not clean. Integrity in financial life is not a personality trait. It is a foundation. And what is built on a dishonest foundation does not stand, regardless of how impressive it looks while it is standing. 5. Warning 4. The peril of pride in prosperity. Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 18:11. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. Solomon had watched what prosperity does to the human heart, and he described it with perfect clinical precision. Wealth, when it accumulates, produces a specific illusion, the illusion that you are protected in ways that others are not, that the rules which govern ordinary people's vulnerability do not quite apply to you, that your financial position has given you an elevation above the normal risks of human life. He calls it imagining a wall too high to scale. It is a fantasy of invulnerability, and it is produced not by wickedness, but simply by the sustained experience of having enough that crises always resolve themselves. You see this in the successful Christian businessman who stops asking for prayer about his business because things have been going well for so long that the habit of dependence has quietly atrophied. You see it in the couple whose financial margin has grown large enough that generosity feels optional rather than essential. You see it in the person who quietly stops tithing because the money feels like theirs now in a way it didn't when they had less. Pride in prosperity is not loud, it is quiet. It is the slow replacement of gratitude with entitlement, of dependence with self-sufficiency, of open hands with closed ones. And Solomon says it goes before destruction, not might precede it, not sometimes leads to it, goes before. It is the step that comes immediately before the fall. The antidote is not poverty. It is the daily, intentional, specific practice of remembering where what you have came from and living in a way that reflects that memory. Point 6. Warning 5. What your work ethic says about your theology. Proverbs 6:6-8. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. Proverbs 14:23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Proverbs 21:25. The craving of a sluggard will be the death of him, because his hands refuse to work. Solomon was not romantic about labor. He did not dress it in spiritual language to make it more palatable. He looked at the ant, and said, that creature with no supervisor and no theology understands something about diligence and preparation that many human beings with access to scripture and community somehow miss. The financial application here is direct and uncomfortable. There is a version of faith that has become an excuse for passivity. It sounds like trust in God. It functions like avoidance of difficult work. Med 8. Prays for provision without creating the conditions that allow provision to arrive. It talks about future plans without putting in the daily, unsexy, unwitnessed hours that make future plans real. Solomon is not calling you to workaholism. He is calling you to integrity between what you say you believe about stewardship and how you actually spend your hours. Because the man who prays faithfully and then works lazily has not integrated his faith and his financial life. He has simply divided them into compartments that do not speak to each other. Diligence is an act of worship. The quality of your work, in your job, your business, your household finances, your financial planning, is a reflection of whether you actually believe that what God has entrusted to you is worth your best effort. The ant does not need a sermon to understand this. Solomon is suggesting that perhaps neither should you. 7. Warning 6. The friend wants your money. Proverbs 19:4. Wealth attracts many friends, but even the closest friend of the poor person deserts them. Proverbs 19:6. Many curry favor with a ruler, and everyone is the friend of one who gives gifts. Proverbs 14:20. The poor are shunned even by their own neighbors, but the rich have many friends. Solomon observed something about human social behavior that every wealthy person eventually discovers, and that most people in the middle of accumulation never see coming. Financial success changes your relationships in ways you did not choose and cannot fully control. Some people will draw close to you as your financial situation improves. They will be warm, encouraging, available, interested in your life, and some of them, not all but some, are there because of what proximity to your resources might eventually provide. They are not villains. They may not even be fully conscious of their own motivations. But Solomon names the pattern because it is real, and because not seeing it costs people dearly. The practical warning here is not paranoia. It is discernment. Ask yourself honestly, are there people in your life whose closeness arrived with your prosperity, whose advice always seems to lead toward decisions that benefit them, whose enthusiasm for your success is curiously timed to moments when they need something? And ask the harder question, have you become someone who uses generosity as a currency for social approval? Who gives in order to be liked, needed, or seen as successful? Because Solomon says that the person who gives gifts has many friends. And the implication is that you cannot always tell which ones are real. Financial wisdom requires relational discernment. They are not separate disciplines. 8. Warning 7. The discipline of knowing what you have. Proverbs 27:23-24. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. For riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations. In Solomon's agricultural world, your flocks and your herds were your financial portfolio. They were your income, your savings, your emergency fund, and your inheritance, all at once. And he said, know their condition. Give careful attention, not occasional attention, not annual attention. Careful, regular, deliberate attention, because riches do not endure forever. This warning is for the person who does not know their actual account balances, who has not looked at their full debt picture in months, who could not tell you within a reasonable margin what their monthly expenses are, who has a general sense that things are fine, but has not sat down with the actual numbers, because sitting down with the actual numbers produces anxiety they would rather avoid. Avoidance is not peace. It is deferred anxiety with compounding interest. Knowing the condition of your financial life, clearly, regularly, honestly, is not a sign of distrust in God. It is the basic stewardship responsibility of someone who has been given something to manage. You cannot manage what you refuse to measure. You cannot improve what you will not honestly assess. This week, before anything else, know your numbers, every account, every debt, every monthly outflow, not to be overwhelmed by them, to see them clearly enough to make a plan that is based on reality rather than on the comfortable vagueness of not quite looking 9. Warning 8. The enviable cost of generosity withheld. Proverbs 11:24-25. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Proverbs 3:9-10. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Proverbs 19:17. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord. He will reward them for what they have done. Solomon ends his financial wisdom where God always ends it, with the open hand. This is not the prosperity gospel. Solomon is not promising that giving always produces immediate financial return in the form of bigger numbers in your account. He is describing a principle that operates at the level of character and spiritual economy, that the person who gives freely is shaped by that giving into someone who can be trusted with more, who attracts the kind of relationships and opportunities that closed-fisted people repel, who lives in a posture of trust rather than fear. The one who withholds unduly, not wisely, not carefully, but unduly beyond what wisdom requires, comes to poverty. Not always financial poverty in the immediate term, but a poverty of soul, of relationship, of spiritual vitality that eventually expresses itself in every area of life, including the financial. Generosity is not a financial strategy. It is a spiritual discipline that happens to have financial implications. And Solomon, who had more money than anyone reading this will ever see, said it clearly enough that there is no way to misrate it. Honor the Lord with your wealth first, with the first fruits, not with what remains, not with what is convenient. First, that sequence, first to God, then to obligations, then to lifestyle, is the inversion of how most people in financial stress actually live. They pay everyone else first and give to God last if anything remains, and they wonder why the cycle never breaks. Practical steps, pappling all 8. This move here is how you take these 8 warnings off the page and into your actual life. This week, identify which of the 8 warnings describes your most pressing financial vulnerability right now. Not the most interesting one, the most pressing one. The one that made you slightly uncomfortable when you heard it. Write it down by name. This week, open your actual financial numbers. Know the condition of your flocks. Every balance, every debt, every monthly obligation. Write it down in one place where you can see the whole picture. This month, build a first fruits habit. Before any other financial obligation is paid this month, move your giving amount first, even if it is a small amount. Practice the sequence that Proverbs says leads to overflow. This month, audit one financial relationship. Is there someone in your life whose proximity to you is financially motivated? Is there a cosigning arrangement or financial entanglement that wisdom says should be addressed? Name it and make a plan. This month, establish a 90-day rule for get-rich-quick opportunities. Any financial opportunity that requires urgency, that promises outsized returns, that came from someone you do not deeply trust. A 90-day waiting period, mandatory prayer, and input from at least one wise financial counselor before any decision. And this ongoing, read one proverb a day with financial eyes. There are 31 chapters, 1 per day for a month. Read each one asking, what is this saying about money, work, generosity, debt, integrity, or relationships? You will not run out of material. Solomon built the most prosperous kingdom in history. He also watched it begin to fracture in his own lifetime, because even the wisest man who ever lived was not immune to the warnings he himself wrote. The warnings are there. They have always been there. The question is whether you will treat them as decoration or as instruction. They were written for you in a language your generation understands. The only question left is whether you will apply them before the cost of not applying them arrives. If this series on biblical financial wisdom has been useful to you, next video is already waiting. When a nation falls because of one man's greed, the story of Achan, one man, one hidden sin, 36 people dead, and an entire military campaign stopped cold. Financial application will reshape how you think about what your private financial choices cost the people around you. That video is on screen right now.